Hello everyone and welcome back to Navis Nobilite. I am Captain Zelnick and today we are continuing our How to Build a Fleet tutorial series, starting today with the Tau Corvatra Merchant Fleet list, and if we have enough time I'll even go into the Commerce Protection Fleet. While they are themselves very different both aesthetically and by rules, at least in the sense of how to use those ships, you can merge them together in a very effective way with the Commerce Protection Fleet as well. And you'll find that while these ships don't merge perfectly, the merchant fleet can provide things to the commerce fleet that you would not normally have access to. So go back, watch all of my ship overview videos based upon the merchant fleet and the Tau Commerce Protection Fleet, and get an idea of all of the rules that are going into this, along with a lot of the meta that goes into how the Tau fight. So first, let's begin. We have our fleet commander options. Now, the Tau have a thing that is very much the same but also very different to your standard Imperial commander. You have two choices, a Leadership 8 and a Leadership 9 commander, and then you have access to rerolls. Now you have the Tau Core L commander at Leadership 8 for 50 points, and a Tau Core O commander at 80 points. What you're going to notice is that your price choices here are a little more, a little kind of in the middle between the Imperial Navy. Actually, we can go up here and check and compare it to the Imperial Navy. The way up here, we watch the thing fly. Okay, so your standard Imperial Commander is 50 points, and Admiral is 100. So the Tau are sitting at slightly cheaper for an LD9 commander. You're getting a bit of a points discount for Leadership 9. Now, again, you're going to run into a situation where you're going to be sitting at your points and wondering, well, which one do I take? Well, it's a 30-point gap, and what you're going to be finding as I build this fleet, you're going to have some wiggle room when it comes to what exactly you're going to have for upgrades and commanders. Now, he comes with one reroll standard, just like an Imperial Navy fleet commander, but you may also carry a member of the Ethereal cast and purchase additional rerolls. An On L gives you one extra reroll for 25 points, and an On O gives you two extra rerolls for 75 points. So these are, I believe, a little more expensive, except for the one extra reroll, it's the same. I believe two extra rerolls is actually pretty cheaper. Let's go back and find out. Actually do a direct comparison. How about that? So looking at your standard reroll, two extra rerolls is 75, so it's exactly the same cost. Okay, so uh, very similar to your standard Imperial Navy design, with a bit of a points discount here with your Core O. Now, building the fleet is going to be also pretty reminiscent of building an Imperial Navy fleet, as this particular fleet is very heavily centered on its light cruisers and its battle cruisers. But you can also build a battleship-centric fleet given the nature of the Explorer. So let's look at our capital ship options. Battleships. Your fleet may include any number of battleships. If your fleet is worth more than 750 points, it must have at least one explorer. Now, this is not really a restriction. There's no reason to never take an explorer or two. They are the cheapest damn battleship for what it does in the game. Now, yeah, they're obviously very fragile, and they are the world's biggest Nova Cannon bait, but the things that these ships can do make 230 points make it instantly worthwhile. Now, your fleet may also include any number of merchant class starships at 95 points. Now, this is a little deceptive. There's an upgrade that gives these things two more hits, which is really important for their survivability. But if you just want an entire fleet of ultra cheap merchants for less than 100 points, there's no reason not to. Merchants are not bad ships. They also bring very important grav hooks to the battle. And grav hooks, as what you're going to be finding, are very important to a Tau build. Now, we also have up to one hero class starship for every merchant or explorer in the fleet. Now, a hero is 180 points, and you're probably wondering, well, why in the world is the hero so restricted? Mostly because the hero is not actually just a cruiser, it's a battle cruiser, and it outperforms most other Imperial battle cruisers just because of the way its weapons are set up. Yeah, it has a pretty pathetic weapons battery, but it has 4 lances attached to it, not to mention launch capacity. It is a brutal, brutal ship, and there's a reason why it's restricted. Now, escorts. Your fleet may include up to 1 messenger-class starship per 500 points. This is also very important. Messengers are very critical to your fleet. Your fleet may include any number of defender starships. You may not have more orcas or wardens than the gravitic hook capacity of the fleet. Much of the cost of these vessels is included in that of the parent ship, so that's why they're so cheap by comparison. Any ship equipped with wardens can be equipped with wardens can only be equipped with wardens and may not have other hooked transport ships. And we have 4 choices here. We have the messenger, we have the defender, we have the warden, and the orca. Now there's another grav hook option here that is not listed. Let's see if I scroll down. Yes, alien subjects mercenaries. We'll get down there in a moment. But we have the ultra cheap orca, the reasonably cheap warden, the defender, and the messenger. Now the messenger is pretty expensive at 50 points. We'll get to the messenger and its purpose in a moment. Now, obviously, we can talk about ordnance. We know what we have: Barracudas, Mantas, and Tau missiles. Squadrons. Defenders are fielded in squadrons of 2 to 6 as normal. They may be combined with squadrons with messengers if you want. They may not be combined with orcas. So anything with a grav hook has to stay with other grav hook things. And I believe orcas have to stay with other orcas, and they can't be squatted up with wardens, though there's really no reason for you to do so. The orca from each parent ship fight as a squadron, so you have to basically combine them together with the same leadership as the parent. Okay? They are deployed separately from the parent, however, and activate different orders. If the parent ships are squadroned together, their orcas may be likewise. So you can't just have a blob of orcas. The parent ships must also be squadroned together. However, the normal squadron limit of 6 still applies. So you may find it necessary to have more than one orca squadron associated with a capital ship squadron. Orcas may be squadroned with other orcas from vessels squadroned with their parent vessels. God, that's repetitive. Orcas may not be squadroned with any other form of escort. Okay. Now, allies, subjects, and mercenaries. Tau fleet uses mercenaries on a regular basis. You may have 1 war sphere if the fleet is worth 1,500 points or up, to 2 war spheres in games larger than that. War spheres are 145. This is very deceptive. The war sphere is highly customizable. Now, the Tau fleet can have 1 demiurge vessel for every 3 Tau capital ships. You can take a stronghold, a bastion, or a citadel. Now, the stronghold holds a very important position in this fleet. I'll talk with you about that in a moment. The bastion and the commerce serve as heavier and more flexible cruiser class, either standard cruiser or battle cruisers. The Nikasar vessels. Your fleet may include Nikasar dhows in place of some or all of its orcas. You may not have more dhows or orcas than a grav hook capacity of the fleet. A ship can have either orcas or dhows, but not both. So the grav hook capacity of the fleet is divided between orcas and dhows. Each dhow is 45 points. The dhow from each parent ship fight as a squadron, just like the orca. Limit of 6. Basically they're making sure that you can only squad up dhows if they're from the same ship, or those 2 ships or its parent ships are squadron together. So that's very important if you want to have a big old squad of 6. So what are we looking at, and what are the purposes of some of this stuff? Well, you have a lot of things to work with when you're building a Tau fleet. You have to balance your launch capacity, specifically your Barracudas and Mantas, because you're going to have a lot, but they're also very important because you only have a choice of a resilient bomber and a rather slow fighter. So you need to have a good amount of fighter and bomber saturation for you to effectively dominate the ordnance phase. And that's very important for the Tau. The Tau have to control the ordnance phase so the enemy doesn't have the opportunity to do things like launch assault boats. You really need to prevent your enemy from, taking control of air superiority in this, or space superiority if you want to go that far. You also have to balance in how many torpedoes am I launching per round? The Tau missile is among the best torpedoes in the game, and it's very, very important that you are able to saturate the board with enough torpedoes that your enemy doesn't have time to launch their own. Again, you are trying to completely control the ordnance phase. That is critical for a Tau victory. The next thing you have to think about is, okay, not everything is susceptible to ordnance. Do I have good weapons coverage? Like, do I have good railgun battery coverage? Do I have good ion battery coverage? These are things you have to consider. So you need to find your balance. Now, you also have to think about, well, if I am rocking it in the ordnance phase, what's a good way to kind of boost up the effectiveness of my weapon batteries? And the answer to that is the messenger. The messenger escort, while it is tiny and a single hit escort, the modifier that it provides to your fleet, namely, you can re-roll all of your turrets if you're within the messenger's zone of influence, and you gain a right shift. You basically ignore the distance shift for shooting over 30 centimeters with your weapons batteries, making what seems to be rather mediocre weapons batteries, suddenly they become not too bad. You suddenly get that leg up that makes life a lot easier. Read the rules on the messenger. It's always good to take one if you're not min-maxing your fleet for torpedoes or bombers. Now, what about your allies, subjects, and mercenaries? You have a lot of good choices here. Now, a lot of people like to frown upon the Kroot War Sphere. People don't realize that the Kroot War Sphere has a very specific purpose. It is very customizable. You can do a lot of things with it. You can make it a big, chonky, hard-to-kill thing, or you can keep it rather small if you want it to be cheap. But what this is really meant for is not actually like a one-off game. These things are made for the planetary assault mission. These things can do more damage to an enemy player in the planetary assault than a Space Marine strike cruiser can, simply because they can land, and once they're landed, the enemy can do nothing as they dump crude onto the world, giving you free assault points like crazy. So it is basically a big, dangerous Fabergé egg of doom that you have to manage and keep alive until it lands. But if it lands, you've won the mission by a huge margin, and you will gain a ton of renown when you do so. Now, the Demiurge ships are functioning as less mercantile and more warship. They're basically your option for if you need a little bit extra punch that you really don't get out of most of the Tau vessels. So you have the Stronghold, which serves as your heavy battleship, your actual gun battleship. And you have the Bastion, which serves as the proverbial heavy cruiser or battle cruiser, and the Citadel, which serves as more of a standard cruiser. Now, you have to know exactly how to use them in concert with the Tau, but if you do know how to do this, you will find that they are a very adequate replacement for a heavy cruiser in your fleet. Though the Hero is good enough to do what you need it to do, and it's, reasonably cheap as a ship, just considering the amount of damage that it can cause. Now, the Nikasar. If you go back and watch my video on the Nikasar, you'll know that I gush about these, and there's a really good reason for it. Nikasar dhows are insanely good little ships. Yeah, they're a little bit slow, but the amount of firepower they have, the amount of mobility they have, and their maneuverability, not to mention having 2 shields as an escort, make them frightening opponents to deal with. These things cannot be ignored by the enemy, and they can just absorb and soak up damage that would normally, make other escort squadrons just disappear off the board. Someone decides, oh, I'm going to drop a Nova Cannon on them. Okay, instead of knocking down all of the shields of the squadron and vaporizing one ship, you actually knock down only one shield off of everything in the squadron, and maybe one ship still dies. Maybe not. It may survive if you get a lucky brace for impact roll. But that means that the enemy can't just send firepower downrange again and wipe them out. They sit there with another shield layer, and they're just as tough and tanky as another escort squadron. Not only that, they're the only escort that has a port and a starboard weapon, at a weapons battery of strength 3, which means if you manage to get it between 2 enemy ships, that's a squad of 6 between 2 enemy ships. That's 18 weapons batteries one way and 18 weapons batteries another. That's battleship level firepower out of an escort squadron for 45 points. They are excellent little ships. I highly recommend them if you have the room for them. They are pretty pricey as Tau escorts go at 45. Now, let's talk about fleet building. Well, why don't we actually play the fleet building game? Let me just adjust this. There we go. Now you can see the good old handy dandy calculator. All right, so let me just adjust this thing's position so you can see things a little easier. All right, so if we're going to be building a Tau merchant fleet, we're going to start, of course, with a commander. Now, I start this by simply purchasing the baseline commander. Okay, Leadership 8, that's not a bad thing. Now, Tau are very, very dependent on reload. Getting a higher point commander may be something we'll think about if we have spare points in the future. We do not necessarily need them now because it's always better to have more ships than it is to have virtually everything else. So we're starting with a leadership 8 commander, a Tau Core L. Now let's immediately give him the obvious thing. We're going to give him a explorer because we need explorers. A baseline explorer or a torpedo explorer. That's up to you. Personally, I prefer the baseline because I like to dominate the ordnance phase. It just has a more substantial impact to dominate that ordnance phase and prevent the enemy from launching effective ordnance like torpedoes or fighters or bombers or assault boats of their own. Controlling that phase is very important. So we have our Explorer. Now this technically takes up the required launch capacity 8 that you need for a 1500 point fleet. The Tau really don't pay attention to that sort of rule. They go like, no, we just want more. We just want more of everything. So because it's so cheap, I'm actually going to buy a second Explorer. Because why not? Launch capacity 16, that's my jam. I like that idea. Now, we have access to 2 heroes minimum right now and escorts. Now, actually, we have launch capacity. We have a squadron. We have grav hooks of 8 right now. Now, what I'm going to do is actually buy orcas because they're very important. They're a great fire platform that has a good lance and it's super cheap. And I have 8 options. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to buy 8 orcas. I have 2 squadrons of 4. Nothing to sneeze at. That's a lot of ion cannons, and it's a good amount of weapons batteries. So let's see. That's 100 points for 4, so that's 200 points. Boom. So we're looking at 710. We have a lot of points. We already have launch capacity 16. We already have 8 orcas. We're doing really well. And we have a lot of points. We're not even halfway through our fleet. So let's go up to our cruiser options. Now, I'm going to go on a limb here and buy a hero because we need a little bit of torpedo. In fact, I'm going to buy 2 heroes because we need torpedoes. Now, we have access right now to those 2. That's all we can really gain access to, as is. So we have a lot of points to play with. We are still begging for ships. Now, let's quickly go and have a look at the merchant itself and see what options are at our disposal for picking. So obviously, when it comes to which of the versions of the hero you want to take, it's up to you to decide which one you want. Personally, I kind of like the Tulku version because I like having those railgun batteries. The ion cannon version is also really good. They're both great. So it's up to you. If I were to be, I have a lot, and I mean this, I have a lot of ion cannons in my orcas right now. So I'm going to have both of these be my Tulku. So I can have a strength 8 45 centimeter weapons battery plus another 4, so that's going to be a strength 12. Now, I'm going to be getting a messenger for this. In fact, let's add that messenger right now. Boom. 1 messenger. Minimum to sit with these 2 guys and make these railgun batteries even more effective. But we're going on to the merchant. Okay, this tiny little guy for 95 points. Let's look at our options. Okay, 15 points, you can increase your hits from 4 to 6, and you have 2 choices, one with ion cannons and one with grav hooks. Okay, now this is a tough choice. We could play the ordnance game or we can play the ion cannon game with weapons batteries. Today, I think I'm going to play the ion cannon game because we already have a lot of orcas on the field, and I may want a little room for some defenders as well. So going back up to the actual fleet list, here we go. Oop, that's the Commerce Protection Fleet. Here we go. All right. Now, we are looking at the escorts. We're looking at the merchant. 95 points plus 15, 110 points for a ship with 2 ion cannons and 6 weapons batteries. Not too shabby. Now, let's look at our defenders. I want defenders because I need large amounts of torpedoes on the board. I got my launchcraft game down because I'm getting 8 out of each explorer and 2 more out of each hero. Now I need more torpedoes. So, we have 135 points for 3 plus 135. Okay, so we are now sitting at 100 and plus 135. Boom. Exactly 1,500 points for 6 defenders. Now, yeah, we're a little bit weak in the leadership zone, but what do we get? A massive fleet with 8 orcas, 6 defenders, 1 a merchant, 1 messenger, 2 heroes, and 2 explorers, if I didn't say that already. This is a beefy, aggressive, mean-spirited fleet that is going to put everything in the game on its back foot because I absolutely dominate the ordnance phase. The answer, the name of that game is the ordnance phase is mine. I have a lot of torpedoes. Good luck stopping them. If you get close to me, that's bad news for me, but I have a lot of ion cannons, and I have a lot of weapons batteries, and even at medium range, my railgun batteries are still really, really good. So, really mean, chunky fleet. And I think you would enjoy this one. All right, now let's try this again, but let's try to add in some of our handy-dandy, friendly merchant allies and mercenaries. So we're going to start off again with a Core L. Leadership 50, nice and cheap commander, and I will be giving him an explorer because we have to have one. Now, this time, and this is important, I am foregoing launch capacity 4. Launch capacity 8 for launch capacity 4. I'm taking torpedoes today, and I'll take 2 of them because why the hell not? Launch capacity 16 out of a torpedo boat. I love a pair of torpedo boats, and I will have them squadroned. Why? Because I'm going to take some Nikasar Dows. Specifically, I'm only going to take 6. Okay? Now, there's a reason for this. I want to take 1 chunky squadron of Nikasar Dows to be a huge block of hate that the enemy can just lay firepower into and soak up all the firepower in the game while my torpedo boats are shooting enormous salvos of hateful death out of their front. Now, I have a bunch of escorts and I have 2 explorers. Now, in order to take any of these other things, except for the Kroot, I need other ships. So I'm going to actually take a bunch of super cheap merchants. So I'm going to take plus 95, plus 95, plus 95. That's 3 merchants. I'm not going to give them their upgrade because I want to save points. Now, I could, if I wanted to be super cheeky, take a stronghold and have 3 battleships floating around the game supported by a bunch of light cruisers and escorts. That would be hilarious, so let's do that. So 1 stronghold, we're at 1415. So we have 1,415, we have 85 points to distribute. We can take a on O for 75 points, and we're at 1490 for having 3 rerolls on a Leadership 8 commander. We could also flip things around a little bit, so that's minus 75. Let's increase my commander to, minus 75. Let's instead increase his leadership to 9. We're at 1445, and I can take a messenger. Boom! Now my fleet is even more of a pain in the ass to deal with, and we're closer to the 1500 mark. So, again, when you're looking at these Kroot vessels, take them in campaigns, or in specific missions, like we are specifically fighting a planetary assault. Your Crute is where you want to go for that. But anyway, that is the Commerce Protection Fleet. I'm sorry, the Merchant Fleet. Let's have a look at the Commerce Protection Fleet and see how it differs. Let me quickly turn the calculator off. Move down. So the Commerce Protection Fleet is designed very similarly to the Merchant Fleet. You just have more toys to play with. The command structure is exactly the same. Now, the battleship options. Your fleet may include any number of explorer battleships. Your fleet may include up to one custodian per full 250 points of Tau vessels, which means in a 1,500 point fleet, if you exactly match to 1,500, you may have two custodians, which is a little bit overkill, but still fun. Allied vessels do not count as the total, so merchants, these guys do not count towards that. You can take a custodian, you may take an explorer. Any number of explorers and a custodian for every full 750. Cruisers, you may have any number of merchant, emissary, or protector class starships, and you may have up to one hero for every other type of ship in the fleet, which is a little weird because the protector actually is higher point cost than the hero. But you have emissary and the merchant and the protector as new choices. As escorts go, you have pretty much the same choices except the addition of the Castellan, which is just a better version of the Defender. You really don't need to take the Defender. Oops, sorry about that. Let me zoom back up. Ooh, that was a heck of a skip. I hate it when that happens. I don't even know how it does that. Okay, so back at the top. Your fleet may include one messenger as normal per 500 points. Your fleet may include any number of Defender and/or Castellan class starships. You may not have more Orcas or Wardens than the Grav Hook capacity. Now, Wardens are different than Orcas. You may have Wardens mixed up in other squadrons. Note how there is no contingency or statement. Let me double check that actually. Wardens in your fleet. Any ships requires wardens may equip with wardens made out of other types. So as you can see here down in the squadron section, it is not mentioned at all if you can mix and match with it's not stated that you cannot mix and match with wardens. Only orcas are left aside. So here we are at our choices. Now we have a lot more options with a lot more effective combat ships. Go back and watch my video about the Commerce Protection Fleet and how it's supposed to function. It is far more gun heavy than it is ordnance heavy, but it does not mean that you still cannot dominate the ordnance phase with what you have here. So let's build a fleet. I'm going to make the calculator reappear. All right, so in this regard, and in this situation, we have a fleet that is more dependent on firepower than it is on torpedoes. But we're going to have to still buy a commander, 750 point minimum. I'm going to go again with our cheap handy-dandy Leadership 8 commander. Now, I know for a fact that I'm going to have at least 700 full points, and I really do want a custodian because they are really, really nice battleships, and they're a little more survivable than the Explorer. So I have my custodian. Now, cruisers. The division between the options here is pretty stark. The emissary is, even if you can't get a tougher version, better in every meaningful way than the merchant. Now, the protector and the hero have two different functions. The hero is very much a heavier cruiser designed to go through a lot nastier environments than the protector, but the protector is still a very effective combat cruiser. And I'm going to focus on a fleet of emissaries and protectors for now. Now, remember that my custodian has a Grav Hook capacity of 3 wardens. I'm going to want to have a squadron of at least 6, so I have a really punchy little escort squadron of ion cannons. So I'm going to start by taking 2 emissaries. These are going to be the Grav Hook emissaries, okay? Plus 110. Now, the Grav Hook emissaries are really punchy. Let's scroll down really quick to them. Sorry for those who can't handle blurred. So the Grav Hooks, we have a couple of choices for Grav Hook equipped emissaries. I prefer the one with the gravitic launcher, so you can squadron them in a set of 2. That allows you to fire a full salvo of not what is it 9 torpedoes out of this tiny little squadron of light cruisers. So what are we looking at? We're at 600 points now. I'm actually going to take a third. So that allows me, if I want, to have a whole bunch of wardens on the table. So we're now sitting at 710. Let's go back up and have a look at our protector options. Oh, so much scrolling. All the way up. Here we go. So our protector at 185 points, I am going to take. Let's see what happens. I take 185 for one and 185 for a second one. So now we have 2 emissaries, 2 protectors, and a custodian battleship, along with a bunch of options for escorts. We're at 1,080. So we probably should worry about escorts. So let's look at our choices. We have a ton of grav hook options for wardens. They're a great little escort. There is no reason not to take a full squadron of 6. Boom. 1,260. We have 240 remaining. We can now take 200. That's 4 Castellans for another set of torpedoes on the board, and we have room for increasing leadership or grabbing extra rerolls. I'm going to increase my leadership by 1 at 1490. We have a really solid fleet. Remember, that is a leadership 9 commander and a custodian. Okay, 2 protectors, 2 3 emissaries, 6 wardens, and 4 castellans. Now you can reduce your fleet by 1 emissary if you so desire. So let's boom do that, and then increase it by 2 castellans. And now you of course 50 plus. So increase it by 2 castellans, and then you're at 1480, but you have 2 full squadrons of castellans. Okay. Now, there's a lot of ways you can mix, match, and fiddle around. So let's say we want to really have a lot more fun, reduce my leadership down to 50 again, add a messenger, boom, 1500. Now remember, the custodian has the messenger's ability, but it's always good to have more than one placement and choice for your messenger bubbles of effect. So it's not a bad thing to take a messenger, even in a commerce protection fleet. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you all again really soon. Have a great day.